Good evening, KZFR. Happy 4th, everyone. How's your 4th going, Brendan?
It's been going pretty good. It's better now that I'm here.
Yep, I am glad to hear that. Well, for everyone first tuning in, this is KZFR Writing on Air. I'm your host, Kevin. This is my co-host, Brendan, and we have a guest with us today. How is it going, Marta?
It's going great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. This is your first time on the show, am I correct?
That's right.
I'm so excited. We love having new people on here. Usually at the intro, we like to go ahead and tell everyone, if you are a new writer, old writer, anything in between, please submit. We need your pieces. You can do so at write.onair@gmail.com.
That is WRITE.onair@gmail.com. Please submit. Please.
We have a YouTube channel. We have a Facebook page. Your pieces make the show. I've always said, Brandon's probably sick and tired of this one, but we are the picture frame. You guys are the picture. We're just here to give you a space to be on radio. And we were talking before the show, too. This is not a critique show. This is an appreciation show. So if you're a new writer or someone who's very scared to get their work out in the public, don't worry about that. We're here to celebrate it. It's wonderful.
And keep in mind, you can always submit anonymously if you are scared. We don't care. We just want to hear your work, and we want other people to hear it and appreciate it.
And you submitting keeps me employed at the radio station. And employed is a loose term. This is volunteer. I'm definitely not getting paid. But keeps me in work, I should say. So I guess we'll go ahead and start getting into your stuff. Would you like to read the first one, or?
Sure.
All right, we'll dive into it.
Okay. So the first poem I'm going to read today is called Acme Products for Trauma Survivors. Next time you throw a piano at me, let me get my footing first, with my hands outstretched, and wait until you hear me say, okay, ready.
I saw the title of this when I was just like, this is when we have to air. Because I grew up on Boomerang with Wile E. Coyote and Acme, and I'm like, yeah, this is perfect.
Oh, I'm so glad you knew the reference.
There's the giant piano or the 10-ton steel dumbbell just waiting with Wile E. Coyote up there.
Yeah, I agree. I love the preparation for this too. Wait a minute, just give me a second. Let me be ready for this. Hold on, and okay, here we go. Like the bracing, the tension is there. I can feel it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really glad that you understood the reference. Sometimes I wonder if I'm the only one who was brought up watching, Bugs Bunny incessantly with my father. So I'm really glad that came through for you.
Yeah.
So any background on this piece?
As far as the background, besides just spending most of my days watching cartoons with my dog, this piece was written as a part of a poetry writing group that I'm in Chico, or I guess used to be in, with a few writers around the community. It was a generative group where we would come together and pick a few we would call them wild words, and create a list and then spend about 15 or 20 minutes writing using those words. And in our group, you could use all or none of them, and then we would just very casually share them at the end. And I got a lot of really good pieces working with that group, and this was one of them.
Man, I love that. And that's actually kind of cool. That is a really good starting mechanic for people who are learning. That's a really good practice. Just pick some words and see if you can write something about it.
Absolutely, because sitting down and saying, I'm going to write a poem about blank is, for me, impossible. That's just not something I've ever been able to do. But just sort of letting your subconscious take over and working with, whatever tools you have at hand, which in terms of this group is, phrases and words, really was effective for me.
Yeah, that's a wonderful piece. Well, you actually submitted quite a few, so we're going to keep moving along and see if we can get through all of them here, or at least as many as we can. So what is this next one called?
Well, to my credit, my poems are really short. So this next poem is called On Being a Woman Who Doesn't Know How to Operate a Sewing Machine. I used to frame it as an act of defiance, my own bra burning in the world of domestic arts. I watched the monsters growl, bobbins jammed, thread clumped in nests, needles stabbing at the air. Unintelligible. The women put their own fingers in harm's way, trying to coax them, unravel their problems. What a waste of time. The machines did the hard work, after all. They deserved a day off. Maybe watch the game. I used to not care that I couldn't sew. Now, I wish I knew how to mend such large things with something so thin.
Those last couple lines are just so great. Because it can apply to so many things. How to solve a large problem of some kind with just something small. Some small answer that's easy.
I love how it's non-traditional, non-conforming at the start, and then at the end it's like, but maybe this is kind of useful. Like I wish I had learned some of it, but the theme of this, like, I don't want to do that. It's an act of defiance. Screw that. I'm not doing it. No way.
Yeah, this is definitely kind of one of my more feminist-leaning poems, in that sense that, when I was younger, feminism and gender issues weren't really something I thought about a lot, and then as I've gotten older, it's part of feminism is a part of my day-to-day life, and so this poem sort of speaks to that.
Yeah, the bra burning. I got that right at the start. That's so good. It's so good. I used to have, or my parents, I should say, used to have a really old foot pedal sewing machine, and I used to love playing on it. So when I first read this, that was the first thing that came to my mind, was just the needle stabbing in the air, like the bobbins jam, like all that stuff. I was like, it just came back as a rush.
I'm so jealous. You know how to sew then?
Nope, I always watched. I played with a little foot pedal, but I do not know how to sew. I can do a little bit of knitting, but that's about it.
I still have no idea how to sew.
I can sew things by hand, but I've never been able to use a machine.
There you go.
Enough to be functional, that's what he's saying.
Yes, enough to fix small tears.
This is such a nice piece. All right, we're going to keep the pace up. What is the next piece you got for us?
Thank you so much. The next piece I have here is a poem called Carcasses. We are hibernating, but it's not winter. We are in the middle of the lake, but we are not swimming. We've made an island of a canoe. I brought berries, nuts, and plums, and you brought beer and some poems that I wrote. Staring out into the woods, I wonder how many mountain lions are prowling, scraping their huge paws against bird carcasses on the ground. They don't eat dead animals, you correct me, and they're nocturnal. And I point out that we're not swimming, but we're still in the middle of the lake.
I grew up in the mountains around fishing holes and everything and tracking mountain lions on trails. So this just, I see this and I'm just like, I'm back in Southern California in the middle of the mountains.
I love the little quip at the end too. They don't eat dead animals, and they're nocturnal. And you're like, I point out, but we're not swimming, and we're in the middle of a lake, so be prepared just in case. You never know.
I appreciate that. So you're from Southern California?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I did not grow up around mountains at all. I'm from the Midwest, Minnesota. And when I came out here, things like bears and mountain lions really terrified me, and to a certain extent still do. And so this poem is kind of speaking to acclimating to being sort of a stranger in a strange land.
Yeah, I grew up around hiking through mountains with tarantulas and brown bears and mountain lions and mountain goats. So I grew up those were life.
Yeah.
I love the wistful feeling that's there too. At the beginning, it's kind of adventurous a bit. Like, well, we brought some stuff and we're just hanging out, but like, also this is kind of unknown. It's a little bit scary. You captured that really, really well. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really glad, because that's something that's sort of a theme that comes up in a lot of my writing, is the question of how prepared can we ever really be for anything.
Yeah, you seem to talk in kind of a very realistic sense, while a lot of poetry tends to be more abstract, but at the same time you're alluding to not more abstract, non-concrete detail.
Thank you.
Well, keep it on coming.
Okay. The next poem I have here is called During the Solar Eclipse. I had a dentist appointment and was the only one there with the NASA-prescribed glasses to view the sun, that piece of chilled fruit. The hygienists took turns boomeranging outside in their scrubs, glasses in hand, heads tilted back, mouths open wide.
I love the frenzy that's going on. The hygienists took turns boomeranging outside in their scrubs while this amazing event's going on. You're at the dentist.
This is a true story.
Oh, so did you literally show up to the dentist's office and they kept borrowing your glasses to go pop outside and check out the eclipse?
Yeah, because, I mean, you would know better than I do, but how often do solar eclipses happen? Once in a lifetime?
No, about every 18 months, actually.
Really? Here,
Yeah.
like in in a particular region, though?
Every 18 months period, but if you're talking about across the U.S., about every, I'd say, 8 years or so, 8 to 10 years.
Oh, for some reason I thought it was much more once in a blue moon than that.
No, it's just that the path of total eclipse came across the U.S., which is much more rare.
That's right. Okay, so that's what I'm thinking of then.
Yes.
Yeah, and I unfortunately had a dental appointment scheduled during, the 15 minutes of the solar eclipse this year. And yeah, and the hygienist definitely, I got those glasses that had the shiny frames and everything, and we all took turns going outside. And I had to write about it. It was so funny.
I love these pieces too because every time we have a different writer on here, they bring a different style to the table. And your style is very much what's going on. This is my life experience right here in a small little tidbit of what's going on through my mind, what I'm experiencing, what I'm seeing. It's very graspable is the best word I can think of. Like we can be right there with you in that moment when you write it. And it's wonderful.
I really appreciate that because some of my favorite writers I would describe in just that way. Some of my favorite poets just really discuss the everyday, and you can look for deeper meaning in it, or you can just take it at an imagistic, circumstantial level and work with that. So thank you.
Yeah, oftentimes, Ryan, we're always told to look for some deeper meaning, some abstract little hint of something. Sometimes just the literal is a breath of fresh air in writing.
I completely agree.
Do I have to bring up the one poem, Brennan?
You're talking about the red wheelbarrow
Yes,
that
I
we've
am.
gone on and on
That's
and on.
a
and on.
recurring theme. Have you read the Red Wheelbarrow by I can't think of the author's name.
I'm familiar with the poem. I also
Yeah.
can't remember the author's name.
Yeah, something, I don't know, it'll come to me probably halfway through this, but in my senior year in high school, we had to read that for one of my honors lit, or my AP lit class, I think, and I hated it, because it's 16 words, I believe, and it's super, super short, and my teacher, who was teaching the class at that time, had written like a dissertation on it, I believe, like a 64-page dissertation. And so when we were unable to come up with like 3 or 4 pages of discussion, she got extremely mad at us. I'm sure she's listening right now, and if so, I'm sorry. I still love you, but that poem destroyed me.
I just Googled it. William Carlos Williams for listeners. So is this show kind of your revenge against high school English teachers for making you, write about that on demand?
Surprisingly, it's kind of, I mean, I guess you could say revenge, but it's come back to bite me because now I'm forcing myself to look at new pieces and that are short ones and long ones and read them and discuss them on a live show. So as much as I didn't like it back then, I'm doing it now. So I guess it's stuck.
Right. Okay, so you're one of those individuals who kind of like sees a problem and leans into it and pushes through it rather than resists it. I admire that.
I'd like to think so, but sometimes I run, I will admit.
Well, at the same time, having you here helps us drastically because we have what we call the Bradbury problem of Kevin and I will look into a poem or a story and we will get one thing out of it, and the author had no intention of what we were saying at all.
Is this the Bradbury problem? Is that a known phenomenon, or is that your term?
It's a known quote by Ray Bradbury of him being interviewed and people asking him, essentially, when people look at your work and they write reviews and stuff, what they're writing, is that what you intended? And he is quoted saying, no, I think he used some expletives, but pretty much they get a lot more out of my work than I ever intended to put into it.
Okay. I can understand that. At the same time, I'm training to be a high school English teacher, and so And so I definitely am one of those people who tends to overread into things and overanalyze.
Yep, that was a funny quote. That was an email that he sent out. Someone asked him, "Hey, do you ever do people overread into things?" And he sent back in like giant words, like a bunch of stuff, and was like, "Yes, they always do. I'm trying to get one thing, and they completely go different ways," which is what Brandon was alluding to. We've actually had that on the show a few times, where when people haven't come onto the show, we can guess and kind of assume and like read into things as much as we can, but sometimes we still miss the point. And I have had readers come up to me afterwards, and they've been like, "Well, that was a great show. I loved it, but you were way off the mark with my piece." And I'm like, I'm so sorry. So I super appreciate having you here to so we can ask you, what is your piece about? Where were you coming from when you wrote this?
I appreciate you having me. This is so much fun.
I'm glad. Okay, so let's move on to the fifth one. We're nearing about the middle, kind of like towards the end. So we're working at a good pace right now.
Okay. This next one is called How to Become a Goldfish. Fill your time. Relays with yourself. Hand your baton off to no one. Food falls from the sky. Take it for granted. Gorge. Glug. Gloss over memory exercises. That fish in the glass, who is that fish? Who is that fish? Don't forget that you have a castle all to yourself. Don't forget to glow, to float.
I love the simplicity in that. It's almost what leaps out to me is the ignorance is bliss. Just, it's whatever. Just float around, be calm, and just kind of go with whatever flow is happening.
Yeah, it's something that really plays off of the common misconception that goldfish only have a 5-second memory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. This poem was written in response to one of my writing mentors, Sarah Pape. Hello, Sarah Pape, if you're listening. She has a series of poems that begin with how to become a blank, how to become a succulent, how to become a beaver, etc. And you can, it's a great prompt if you are ever sitting around with writer's block and trying to just come up with something to write. Think of a plant or an object or an animal and try to inhabit that and just write a few lines. It's a really great way to be productive.
I love all of this. My favorite stanza is the food falls from the sky. Take it for granted. Gorge, glug, and repeat just over and over. That line really sticks out for just the embodiment of a goldfish in my mind.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that's kind of one of those poetic tricks, alliteration. Another kind of theme that comes up in my writing is abundance. I tend to talk about consumption a lot, and this is, not to overanalyze my own poem, but one of those poems that speaks to that as well.
Please do overanalyze your own poem. That's all I can say. As much as you want. If you want to dive in, go for it. This is the place for it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I love this this piece here. That fish in the glass. Who is that fish? Who is that fish? Because that really talks about that 5-second goldfish memory, not even recognizing yourself in your reflection.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, let's see. How many more pieces do we have here? I think you submitted 9 total, if I counted right. Because we picked a few, but there were still some extras. 1, 2, 3. I think we should read, because we still have an okay amount of time left, On a Phone Call with My Sister Who Still Lives in Minnesota, because I like that one a lot.
Okay. So that's the title, On a Phone Call with My Sister Who Still Lives in Minnesota. She asks me why I compost, why I make a small mountain of avocado shells and coffee grounds in the backyard. Our mother used to collect pop can tabs for no observable reason. Gallon-sized Ziploc bags full of them. Composting, to my sister, seems like that. I don't know the chemical process, but somehow it all decomposes back into dirt. Somehow it can be used to grow things again. The silence from her end reminds me of being younger and not believing adults who said foreign languages were spoken in other countries. Portuguese, Swedish, like horses with wings, invented for fiction. I assumed that little girls in Brazil and Sweden called a bug, and Kool-Aid, Kool-Aid, just like everyone else in my world. To my sister, The magical soil of California now falls on a list of famous storytime duos from the Wild Wild West. Cowboys and Indians, Roadrunner and Coyote, older sister and her pile of transformative dirt.
There's so much great here. Roadrunners and coyotes, and I love your little italicized kind of inner monologue there of, I don't know the chemical process, but somehow it all just breaks down to dirt. Somehow it can be used to grow things again.
I appreciate it. I just realized that I brought 2 poems that have Coyote and Roadrunner in it.
The themes are recurring. Oh no. I love the innocence in the, I don't know how far down this is, but Portuguese, Swedish, like horses with wings, invented for fiction. I assume that little girls in Brazil and Sweden called a bug and Kool-Aid, Kool-Aid, just like everyone else in the world. There's that saying that kids don't see really many differences. Everything's the same to them. And that's such a sweet, sweet thing that really is so valuable in a child. You capture that so well.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember having to have that conversation with my dad that, in other parts of the world, people didn't speak our language, and just taking a long time to process that. And, just in the same way that my sister still doesn't really understand why I pile up coffee grounds and carrot shavings in the backyard. So I definitely saw a parallel there.
Yeah, and I love this little tidbit that I don't think many people nowadays will know or remember, and that's pop can tabs. Because the thing is, soda cans you pulled a tab off of the can entirely, and I don't think a lot of people remember that. And I can't remember why I used to keep them. I think maybe recycling. I don't know, but I do know a lot of people used to collect pop can tabs for some reason.
Right. Did you call it pop when you were growing up? I thought it was soda out here.
It was soda out here, but I grew up around a lot of different people that came from back east and Midwest, so I heard pop, I heard soda, I heard soda pop, and...
Mm-hmm.
We're sharing a mic here, so if there's intermittent pauses, that's why. The best part of this poem for me is I'm an only child. So when I get to hear about people writing about conversations with a sibling, I get to see a snapshot of what that is for them. And for me, this blows me away because it's normal. It's meandering. It's just like, oh, what's coming to mind? Let's just chat. Let's just be frank with each other. What are you doing? What am I doing? What's going on? What's in my mind? It's just, that to me is the most beautiful part of that whole relationship. It's such a cool piece to read.
I really appreciate it. And, for anyone who has a sibling who they're as close to as I am with my sister, you talk pretty much every day and you run out of things to talk about. And so you end up discussing your household chores, like taking out the compost. So that's pretty much where this poem came from.
That's how you know you're close to someone, I think, when it gets to the point where they know every detail about you after a certain point.
I totally agree.
Well, we're nearing the end of our show, and I'm implementing something new in the upcoming shows, I should say. Marta, I prompted the question before this. What advice would you give someone who's just starting writing, and maybe even someone who's been writing but doesn't know where to take the next step or where to go? And then how did you get into it?
That's such a good question. That's kind of 2 questions. So how did I get into writing? I've been writing actually since I was a little kid. I was one of those weirdos who wrote a novel when I was 10, and I had friends who we went to creative writing classes and stuff when we were little. And as far as, where you should turn if you are a beginning writer or if you just feel stuck in your writing, I would kind of stick with that advice of, reach out and find your mentors, reach out and find your community. I wouldn't be the writer I am today without my teachers at Chico State, like Jeannie Clark and Sarah Pape, and without my friends in town with whom I've been writing for years and years. The fact that I've got groups that meet regularly, hold me accountable to producing and editing work. And then the fact that I've had teachers who are super open to me bothering them all the time about questions about my writing has definitely helped me develop, whether they appreciated it or not. Another thing I would suggest as far as where to turn when you're beginning or when you're feeling stuck is to turn to what you like to read. And I know that this is pretty trite advice for creative writing, but think about the poets that you like to read, or nonfiction writers or fiction writers, whatever it is, and just try to emulate them. Try to first just copy them and copy their voice, and think about what subject matters in your life align with what they're writing about, and try to emulate it. And I think from there you start to develop your own voice, sort of jumping off that lily pad of trying to emulate those that you love. So is that a good answer? Okay.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Usually when I ask people this, a lot of and Brandon, you can back me up on this if I'm correct or not, a lot of the responses are, just get out there and do it, just do it, which is a valid response, trust me. I mean, if you're afraid to start writing and you want to start writing, there's no place to start but right now. Just get out there and write. But you brought in a different aspect, which we haven't heard yet, which is find a community for it. Find something to back you and find something to keep you going. Find people specifically to keep you accountable for writing and editing and all that stuff, because when it comes down to it, it can be tiring to do it by yourself. If you have people that are putting on stress to keep you going, not necessarily bad stress, but just some reinforcement, that's more valuable than anything I can think of.
And Chico is such an amazing community for people who enjoy writing. Shout out to the bookstore downtown. They host a poetry reading the third Thursday of every month at 6:30. Anyone who's interested in reading their poetry out loud can go there. I've met some amazing writers at those events. And, not every town has a radio show that's dedicated to creative writing. So you guys are really doing a lot of that work too. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the small plug right there. I appreciate it quite a bit. Well, we're actually at the end of our segment today. It's gone pretty quick. It always feels like it goes like lightning, for me at least. So thank you for coming, Marta. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and this has been Writing on Air. I guess we'll do our outro now, Brennan, because we're kind of at the end, I guess, completely. Yeah. This is Writing on Air, KZFR, and you can submit at write.onair@gmail.com.
That's WRITE.onair@gmail.com.
We have a YouTube page or YouTube link, I guess. You can find us at Writing on Air. All the shows are on there relatively quickly after the show airs. Don't say anything, Brendan.
Go to kzfr.org if you actually want to hear the show within 5 days.
Sometimes I'm a little bit behind on uploading those, but I'm getting better at that. We also have a Facebook page, and please, as I've said before, you guys make this show, so please submit, please be part of the show. If you want to be on here, you want to submit anonymously, you can do so. We would love to have you. So thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
And have a happy 4th of July.